Hello everyone, this is Cece from Reigniting Women for Christ. And before you is one of my favorite scenes, anything with ocean, waves crashing against the shore or against the rocks. Um, this along with prayer provides me with a lot of serenity. It just reminds me the beauty and the magnificence of Abba Father, Yahweh, the great I am. It reminds me of the expanse of his magnificence, right? The depth of the ocean is a reminder of the depth of his love. The expansion of the ocean, where you can go beyond one country to the next, various oceans, the Atlantic Ocean, the Pacific Ocean, how it extends and it seems almost seamless. And that's really in terms of the extent of his magnificence. It's seamless. Remember, there's no beginning or end. He's just I am. And I think during the turbulent times that we're experiencing, this is just a little gift. I am kind of learning how to use technology with my audio reflection, but I wanted to share a little bit with you. But more importantly, what I wanted to do was to follow up with some of your requests. And thank you so much for following up with me. Some individuals wanted to inquire really about what do I use in terms of Bibles for studying. So what I wanted to do was to share with you tonight, just based on a couple of emails I received and some dialogue I had with a couple of you, how do I start in terms of reading the Bible? Getting to really love the Bible, really to have a ferocious appetite for the Bible, consuming the word, and what that entails. And really the only way you can do is to begin, right? Understanding the truth. If the truth does not turn your lukewarmness into passionate and hot for Christ, I'm not sure what else will. I think that's what really did it for me, really understanding the truth of who we are and whose we are. And rather than be angry at the lies that we've been told, there's really no time for that. Clearly, we can see that in terms of what's been happening in the world. I think it's important just to put all our energy in terms of getting to know Abba Father. And the only way we could get to know him is to get to know his books. And all his books were inspired. Now, there are scholarly debates by religious scholars, historical scholars about the number of books of the Bible and which books indeed are they originally 60-something books or 80-something books or a lot more. I would rather say that they're possibly a lot more. And if we turn towards the Vatican and their archive library, hidden 3 or 4 cellars below the Vatican, buried with top clearance access, I think that in and of itself, that fortress speaks for itself. But having said that, regardless of what's going on and what individuals have done in the past, God is still, the God of yesterday, today, and forever. And his magnificence, his power, and his ability to make things happen just the way he wants it to happen, right? We call that divine providence or just providence, right? Everything happens at the right time. It's like that. That's what order is about. And that's one of the reasons why I strongly believe to my very essence about the creation. I always have, and I thank God for my parents, both my parents, for really supplying that with the foundation for having a love for Jesus Christ, having a love for God, understanding who he is and whose we are, and understanding, regardless of what color we might have thought back in the day when it was all whitewashed, we still had a love for God, because that's the way we were raised. And we were raised reading the Bible. We were raised going to church. Though the wrong days, but we were raised in the church. So the next step is moving forward, right? So we all have a history. I tell my sisters all the time when we talk about it, rather than to talk about where you were, let's talk about where you are and where you want to go. And that is future, fast forward to the future. My goal is to be part of that 1,000-year reign with Jesus Christ. and beyond that. Okay, so the only way we can do so is if we have been divinely designed for that, as well as we are going through an awakening process, understanding who we are and understanding what He desires of us. And like any parent, there's structure, there are rules and regs to His kingdom, and there will always be. And it's important to know that the rules and regs He set in His kingdom, He laid out from the very beginning on the 7 days, starting with keeping the Sabbath holy. And I remind you in every audio, because I think it's very important to remind you over and over again, that the covenant that He made was a perpetual covenant. And perpetual means everlasting, it does not end. And may I remind you again, the birth of Jesus Christ coming in as a sacrificial lamb removed the law of animal sacrifice. It did not remove the 10 commandments, the commandments, and it certainly didn't absolve us from the Sabbath and those other commandments. Okay, so it's with that idea in mind. If you begin, I recommend for those of you who are starting off and probably didn't have parents that were believers, who had a strong faith, who was just an Easter Sunday church attendant. I would recommend, if you don't have a Bible that was donated to you at any point in time, just go to a store or go online and order a Bible. Many people, they have a lot of different standards and versions of the Bible. You have King James, the Bible, you have NLT Bible, you have so many, but at the end of the day, you start with the basics. And what I would recommend in your spiritual walk, if you're really serious and you really want to conduct a deep dive, I would recommend getting a Bible online. What I'm showing you today is one of my Bibles that I use. It's an online version, and I've downloaded it. And with this particular version, I will show you what you can do in terms of verifying some of the scriptures and expanding your knowledge, which I find that's amazing. So I do have my Bible that was gifted to my parents, gifted to me by my parents good 25 years ago. And that was copyrighted maybe in the 70s, 69, 70s. I have a Bible that I obtained from my pastoral care department at work. So I use that Bible. It's a little bit more up to date. It's probably copyrighted in terms of printed and copyrighted like maybe in the 80s. I have a KJ version online on my phone that I use, and that's pretty current, and you can tell by certain language that's used, so just be mindful to be online. And then you have something like this, the King James Version, that would give you the KJ Standard, and then the KJ, that's King James Version Standard, and King James Version 1611, meaning it was published in the 1611. So let's first go through it. And in addition to that, it has like biblical trivia and discussions, some online responses, etc. In terms of the individuals who are actually manning the site, I am not sure, but what you can do is to download and start printing some of these chapters so that in event the online is not available for any period of time, or again, you at least have hard copies available of a more complete version of a Bible. So here you have what is called the King James Version, that's standard. Many of us know it as the Old Testament, which set forth by the prophets, Genesis all the way to Malachi, and then the New Testament starts with Matthew all the way to Revelations. Okay, and these are all the typical books you'd find in any day Bible. And then you have the King James Version from 1611. And I really like this version. This is the version I try to read out a lot. King James Version had really a lot of slack from a lot of scholars. I call them religious snobs. Because part of the dialogue or the discourse in the religious community, in the scholarly religious community, is that King James, what does he know about interpreting and translating Hebrew into English. And I am going to tell you what I was told. Because so much information, you have to decide what's important to you and what you're going to read and what sounds like kind of fact and what you're going to park at the back of your mind, maybe for future research. But right now, I would recommend focusing on the chapters. But just a little bit of history. So King James, there was a division in the church, and in order to move away from the Roman and the Pope Constantine, King James decided to rebel and translate the Hebrew or Latin into the Queen's English, and hence the reason for coming up with a King James version. But one of the things I need to underscore is that he did not do the translation. He merely placed the order and had religious scholars within his kingdom to do the translation. So these individuals who were educated, they're familiar with of course, translation, and they work together and compile the King James Version. So what you're going to see is the King James Version in what you call the Queen's English back in the day. But what I like about this, I don't know if you guys can see it here. So with the Standard English, it's called just the regular Bible. You have the Old and New Testaments, as you can see summarized here. The Old Testament from Genesis all the way to Malachi, right? Here you go. All the chapters you should know. And then you have the New Testament from Matthew all the way to Revelation. And then what the King James Version 1611 has is what you call the Apocrypha. Now the Apocrypha is referred as lost books. So let's see what it says, okay? Because I'm not a biblical scholar. I'm learning. I'm a student just like you. So here it says the Apocrypha. Lighten this a little bit so you can see. My computer sometimes blocks the language. So here we go. Apocrypha. 2 seconds. Okay, never mind. So it says the Apocrypha is a selection of books which were published in the original 1611 King James Bible. So the first time I saw that, which was years ago, it really blew my mind. 1611. So the Apocrypha are the lost books that were pulled out for whatever reason. These apocryphal books were positioned between the Old and New Testament, also contained maps and genealogies. The Apocrypha was a part of the King James for 274 years until being removed in 1885 AD. A portion of these books were called deuterocanonical books by some entities, such as the Catholic Church. There we go again. Many claim the Apocrypha should never have been included in the first place, raising doubt about its validity and believing it was not God-inspired. For instance, a reference about magic seems inconsistent with the rest of the Bible. Tobit, chapter 6, verses 5 to 8. Others believe it is valid and that it should never have been removed, that it was considered part of the Bible for nearly 2,000 years, which I'm part of that school of thought, before it was recently removed a little more than 100 years ago. So it was just recent, 100 years ago, it was removed from the Bible. Some say it was removed because of not finding the books, the original Hebrew manuscripts. Others claim it wasn't removed by the church, but by printers to cut costs of distributing Bibles in the United States. Both sides tend to cite the same verses that warn against adding or subtracting from the Bible. Revelations 22:18, which is true. The word Apocrypha means hidden. Fragments of Dead Sea Scrolls, going back to before 70 AD, contain parts of the Apocrypha books in Hebrew, including Sirach and Tobit, right? So fragments of it was found in the Dead Sea Scrolls. So keeping this in mind, when reading the following apocryphal books, Martin Luther said, Apocrypha, that is, books which are not regarded as equal to the Holy Scriptures, and yet as profitable and good to read. Keep that in mind. One of the things I've observed while doing my research, and I always go back to that because you go back to what you know. So one of the things I found out is that one way of identifying whether you're heading in the right direction in research is that, and the Bible tells us about this, if you have confirmation, 2 or 3 witnesses. When you stand in agreement, 2 or 3 in agreement, right? It's the same thing. If you have a text that's written in 2 or 3 places, that would be considered historically sound. So that's something that's both biblical and research world as well. Confirmation of 2 or 3 witnesses, standing 2 or 3 in terms of testimony. And it's the same thing with research where you have 2 or 3 places where certain information will be disclosed or explicated to a certain extent. So books of the Apocrypha, what I like about this online, which I would recommend you do, again, this is the online here. I may not have said anything to you earlier. It's kingjamesbibleonline.org/apocrypha books. And if you go down here you have the books of the Apocrypha. Now in the regular Bible, there's only one Esdras. In the Apocryphal books, there are 2, Esdras 1 and 2. Here's the book of Tobit. It referenced above that it was part of the Dead Sea Scrolls. Fragments of it were found there. So you have the book of Tobit and the book of Sirach. Okay, here you have additions to Esther in the regular Bible. There's the book of Esther, but they have Esther too, so the additions to the book of Esther. Wisdom of Solomon, here you have Ecclesiasticus. In the other Bible, there's Ecclesiastes. Baruch, letter of Jeremiah, prayer of Azariah, which I don't know. You have Susanna. I'm doing an audio reflection on the different women of the Bible and how it ties into us today and how we to be women of Christ and handmaids of Christ, ambassadors of Christ, disciples of Christ, all under one thing. Here's Susanna. We have Judith, and so let's see here. Bell and the Dragon, Prayer of Manasseh, and First Maccabees 1 and 2. I know about 4 weeks ago, Pastor Martibu did a wonderful chronology of our history, comparing it alongside the history that we learned in school, and it fit perfectly. And part of that history, he spoke about the Maccabees. There's this family, had about 4 or 5 sons, excuse me, in different times. They reigned and were in power. And it's just a beautiful story that fits in perfectly in terms of who we are and whose we are as a whole. As you go further, you see the King James Version, again, standard. You have the introduction. It spoke about the Apocrypha if you need it for mobile. And then, of course, the introduction, study tools. You have Bible trivia, verse of the day, inspirational messages, etc. So this might be the only part where it will tell you that give pause to the site because of the images. But if you can disregard the images for now, and again, take your own Bible and use it based on and what you have learned from these two, the standard. And for me, I have a strong preference to reading the King James Version 1611, then that's the way to go. And again, the more you read, if you dedicate an hour a day, that is a good start, and you continue moving forward. If you want to do reflections like me, the more the merrier. I'll be happy to give you and share with you the tools that you can use with your own audio reflection. If you don't want to share it, you don't have to. But we are at a point where we're called to share and win souls for Christ, right? The Bible tells us, and the reason why I do this as well, again, disclaimer, I'm not a pastor, preacher, prophetess, or any, but the Bible tells us that when we win souls for Christ, it's not only, it's a positive thing, right? It's a benefit for us and benefit for the person. And it's a win for the kingdom. It's a win in the column for the kingdom. Jesus' kingdom and what we will be doing. So you can never go wrong when you guide people from the broad road to the narrow road. And that has always been my point with my audio reflections. It's very easy to criticize myself. And while you feel naked, being transparent with the world, it's a safe space, because working and living for Christ is about humility. You know, ultimately, he transformed, manifested in the flesh, and he decided to put on a physical body. And of course, when he placed on a physical body, to learn and experience his humanity, it is important to know that he left his power, right? And even though he had the guidance of God in every step of the way, he didn't have to do that. That's a very humbling experience. And ultimately, be beaten, stripped and beaten, scorched, and going on the cross, that's the ultimate humbling experience. So, anything else, if we have to make a fool of ourselves for the Lord's, then so be it. Because you know what? He was there for us. He was our ride or die, and he's still there for us. So I suggest if an audio reflection is what you want to do, so be it. If you want to do something more grand, and you have the skill set to do so, I certainly prefer support women, and it's important that we edify each other. But it's for me, it's fun and it's wonderful just hearing the different positions and then spending that long time getting a word. So the other day, what I did was I read the full chapter of I heard one guy was talking about Joel, and Joel just has, I believe, 3 chapters. So Sunday night, I read 3 chapters of Joel. So when you click on it, here you have chapter 1. You can reduce the size. You can see that, right? In terms of the font size. And you can share particular scripture, etc. So you can go and email your kids, your family members in terms of particular chapter and area, and they have parallel view. So that's an option as well. You have the King James Version with the King James 1611, just to see if there are any major changes. And some of the letters you can tell spelled differently. Other than that, so that's why I like the online version. But when during the Sabbath, I hold my paper and I'm sitting with my other Bibles. So these are just some tips on what I recommend, and give you a little bit more view of the ocean as I bid you good night. Typically, I don't leave messages, but I think it's important to share. There's so much news that's coming about, and you know, you can feel sad, or you can pray. You can get angry, or you can pray. You can march, protest, and talk about Black lives, or you can pray and consume the word. And for me, I'm opting to, while I can participate, like tomorrow at the job, they're having a white coat for Black Lives Matter right outside a hospital. I'll probably step in for that for a few minutes. But at the end of the day, the depth of this ocean, knowing it expands beyond the horizon, this is a reminder of the beauty and the power, BP, the beauty and the power of I am. So I hope this edified you, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen at the moment. Should you have any questions or concerns, again, you can email me. If the Spirit moves me to leave another audio reflection this week, I'll certainly do so. I would love to explore another female of the Bible, but again, I could only move if I feel there's a message for someone. Okay, until then, have a blessed week, my sisters. May God bless you, and may He continue to place His face upon you.